Have you ever noticed how Ragatha and Jax always clash with each other? It makes sense after all. Ragatha is always trying to be a people pleaser while Jax intentionally sabotages people and is a massive troll. But what if I told you that it's not just Jax that's crazy, but secretly, Ragatha's balls too? This video was initially supposed to be a section of a full theory for every episode from 5 to 9 predicting how the show itself will end, specifically by analyzing the characters and the overall theme of the story. First of all, we'll start with an explanation of Jax as a person and shape what his personality is like. He's characterized by being excessively edgy, avoidant, aggressive, sneaky, manipulative, and holds in a lot of his deeper emotions. I'm going to avoid the idea that Jax is an NPC because the creator of the show, Gooseworks, already confirmed on Tumblr that he is a real person along with everybody else. In fact, Gooseworks revealed the deeper layers of Jax on Tumblr too. For example, Gooseworks says that Jax is a troubled individual, that he's a big cocktail of internal issues, and implied that he does have a big moment that'll happen later regarding his emotional vulnerability. Gooseworks also confirmed that Jax will have his most immoral action later on in the story too. The most interesting part though is how our favorite character in the entire story is actually Jax himself. What about Ragatha though? Isn't she the opposite of Jax? While Jax is clearly insecure and intentionally makes everyone suffer as some sort of coping mechanism, Ragatha appears as a sort of motherly angel of kindness that reassures everyone that everything is okay. In essence, she's supposed to be the opposite of Jax, someone that always looks out for others instead of pushing them away. However, I think there is a personality overlap between Ragatha and Jax that will be explored in episode 5 and eventually impact the rest of the story entirely. I think Ragatha's issue is that she's deeply insecure about how others feel about her, which causes her to overcompensate by being super friendly. However, this friendliness is a sort of lock on her true personality and feelings, which limits the ways that she can express herself. In episode 4, she accidentally takes in some of the stupid sauce, which causes her to act, well, stupid. Even though she's always nice to Gangle, because of her state, she accidentally slips up and calls Gangle annoying.
5?
No offense, but you're kind of annoying when you have your happy mask.
She also says this to Jax too.
Can you move?
Yo, Jax. I hate you, but I don't want you to hate me. Is that weird?
The importance of this is that the stupid sauce shows Ragatha's true colors, and I'm positive this is a hint to what will happen in episode 5. It seems like people are catching on to how Ragatha's behavior is forced in nature, to the point where Gangle can't really trust her.
Oh, Ragatha. I love her, but after a while it gets kinda hard to tell how genuine she's actually being.
That's why after this, Gangle made a drawing of herself, Zubul, Pomni, but not Ragatha. On a separate but related note, every episode foreshadows a future event in some way. The beginning of episode 1, for example, has Pomni immediately notice an exit door, which foreshadows the climax of episode 1. The beginning of episode 2 has Pomni wake up from a nightmare and clip into an object. This foreshadows how Pomni and Gummy Goo escape from under the map. Kinger turning back to normal when it's dark was also foreshadowed in episode 2, when he puts a bucket over his face.
I remember how long it took for you to adjust.
Oh, yeah. I'm surprised you remember that.
The beginning of episode 3 has everyone see what happens when they hold their breath, which foreshadows how Kinger and Pomni escape hell by holding their breath. The beginning of episode 4 has Ragatha teach Gangle how to throw a softball, which foreshadows the last scene where Gangle throws her mask away. But what if this scene wasn't just foreshadowing Gangle, but foreshadowing something else in a future episode? When the first episode released, there was a video showcasing brief segments from the work in progress episodes, those episodes being 2, 3, and 4, and a small hint as to what episode 5 will be about.
Wait, this isn't finished yet, don't look!
As you can see, this resembles a stadium. What sport requires stadiums? That's right, baseball. If you zoom in, you can even see the baseball dugouts too. Therefore, I think it's highly likely that episode 5 will be a baseball tournament, most likely everyone in one team versus various NPCs. I can even see something like halfway through, Gummy Goo turns out to be the pitcher while Pomni is the batter. Gooseworks posted a tweet regarding which character gets the spotlight for episodes 3 to 6. Episode 3 was Kinger and Zubul, episode 4 was Gangle, and this episode will be Ragatha, along with Jax following right after for episode 6. Regarding this, Gooseworks had this to say on Tumblr. I said episode 5 is the Ragatha episode, and that's still mostly true. But I think it's probably a bit more accurate to say that Ragatha and Jax kind of share episodes 5 and 6 equally. This is important because it seems like they'll constantly fight throughout these episodes. After all, Jax consistently acts balls to the others. But what if episode 4 was foreshadowing episode 5 in an unexpected way? Again, Ragatha took the stupid sauce, which causes her to accidentally slip up and say things that she normally wouldn't say. And by the end of the episode, you can see that even after the adventure ended, that Ragatha is still intoxicated. If this keeps up in episode 5, this would obviously cause issues for the team, but I think the stupid sauce hints at even crazier events for this episode. What did Gooseberg say about there being a dangerous duo on the show? You'll have to wait and see. What did Gooseberg say about Jax? You'll get to see the worst thing Jax will do with your very eyes. What is the last thing such a competitive sport like baseball needs in order for the players to win? Kindness. What trait is brought out as a result of competition? Selfishness. And who gets the spotlight in this episode? Ragatha and Jax. This is what I think will happen in episode 5. Throughout the baseball match, Ragatha will have to juggle balls with pleasing others and appearing genuine while also being competitive. However, that generosity of hers will impact the team's performance negatively, causing Jax to intervene. Ragatha is stressed out by how she can't be a people pleaser because her kindness is making the team lose, and thus everyone's getting even more annoyed by her. This is where Jax comes in. He'll reach out to Ragatha and do one of the worst things in the entire show by controlling her and giving her his own advice to win. That is, to disregard her kind facade and act selfish. After all, kindness is the last thing you need if you have to win. Jax will make Ragatha think that her being selfish is actually the key to win, and as such, for this one event, their goals and personalities will finally align. Ragatha and Jax will become the most dangerous duo by acting balls in baseball, the two balls convinced that selfishness must be the only way to win. However, in the process, Ragatha will go way too far and overcompensate, acting like a toxic teammate and having everyone else lose their trust in her. Ragatha joining Jax was foreshadowed in episode 2 as well. Episode 2 begins with Pomni having a nightmare about her abstracting, and she looks up to see Kane, Jax, and Ragatha dismiss her as if she's unwanted.
Distracted.
Well, I guess we're not all cut out for it.
I don't even remember her name, honestly.
This clearly hints at how Pomni sees all three of them as untrustable. To predict the way the episode will end, we have to consider the structure that the previous episodes have taken. Each episode starts out with a classic adventure, but partway through something happens that puts everything off course. Then the events reach some sort of epic climax that was foreshadowed earlier. However, the focus isn't on the events themselves, but rather the character development that the characters experience as a result. Each quest, no matter how personalized or engaging they may be, always ends up with the characters disappointed in some way. To come up with an idea for how this episode will end, we have to consider the Kane plotline too. In episode 3, when Subo told Kane that nobody likes his adventures and explains why, Kane temporarily loses his confidence in himself. As a result, he begins to glitch out, which affects the entire circus. In episode 4, even though Kane gave Gangle the exact adventure she wanted, Gangle was clearly miserable. Right after witnessing that, he begins to glitch out again. I think Kane is slowly developing a cognitive dissonance when it comes to his adventures. Each episode from now on will only make this worse and worse until it... Based off this, I think despite the way that Jax and Ragatha will act in this episode, they'll still be able to lead the team to victory. At a price, however. After they win, Ragatha realizes she can't go back to her old self because everyone has lost their trust in her. This annihilates her entire personality and reason to really stay sane at all. Because of Jax and Ragatha's actions, despite the fact that they all won, everyone's upset regardless. Kane seeing everyone upset despite the fact that they won would confuse him further, adding more fuel to his already dangerous cognitive dissonance. Jax's relationship with control is also put into question here. We can assume Jax went through something in his original life that made him feel limited or helpless and unable to make any decisions for himself. In the digital circus, I bet those feelings continued, until he realized he could actually break the plot of these quests in some way. As a result, especially fueled by his idea that nothing matters in the circus, he's constantly trying to maintain complete control over the narrative, how he appears to others, and how to stay in people's heads. An unexpected side effect of Ragatha abandoning her kind facade is that it affects Jax too. Ragatha was always kind to everyone, even Jax, despite the fact that she secretly dislikes him. So after being exposed for who she really is, she stops letting Jax control her entirely. I believe that'll impact Jax mentally more than it seems. After all, we've already seen how Jax acts when Gangle is the one bossing him around, instead of him being the one bossing her around.
How you doing?
Everything's been... I'm doing fine.
Wish I could say the same.
Gooseberg said that episode 5 is the lightest of all the episodes and implied it's the calm before the storm. I think episode 5 will seem inconsequential until you look at how it'll impact the future episodes. Episode 6 is still Jax and Ragatha, but with a focus on Jax's character this time, and Gooseberg's described episode 6 in one word: guns. Considering the edgy interests that Jax has, he'll definitely love a weapon-themed adventure. However, Ragatha will still have beef with Jax and will only get worse as time goes on. Ragatha essentially lost her entire reputation while Jax lost the last person who was kind to him. Based off the themes of the story, based off the concept of friendship being what holds people together, and based off the reoccurring theme of pretending to be someone you aren't, I think this makes perfect sense.
In this world, the worst thing you can do is make someone think they're not wanted or loved.
Goosebriggs confirmed that outside of Kinger, the closest person to going insane is somebody completely unexpected. Out of context, nobody would assume it's Ragatha, but in context it makes perfect sense.
After a while, you start to realize that you really can't leave, and constantly chasing an unattainable goal will start driving you a bit crazy. And eventually you get to asking what the point of anything is, and you completely lose sight of who you are and why you're even alive, and when you reach your breaking point, something really terrible can happen.
Despite episode 5 being the most lighthearted, it'll be the first spark that eventually leads to one of the two completely losing it and having a chance to abstract entirely. Regardless, nothing is set in stone for sure, this is just a theory. Again, this was originally supposed to be a massive video theorizing episodes 5 to 9 simply based off the themes of the story and what's already been hinted at. I just separated it into episode 5 only because the real episode would already be out long before then. In my opinion, mixing theories with your own creative ideas on what could happen is completely valid in my eyes, as long as it doesn't blatantly disrespect the themes of the story, the established character traits, and the general vision of the story the author has. I don't think anyone has the right to crucify you over your take. As a bonus, while I was finishing up this script, I found this fanart a year ago of Ragatha from Pomni's Nightmare on Twitter. Goosebriggs made this reply: "People getting attached to this evil version of Ragatha is gonna make episode 5 so much funnier." Anyway, I have more theory videos planned for this series eventually. I'd like to see your thoughts in the comment section too. This isn't the last you'll see of me.